Garcia Peña. We're very excited to be here today. And we also thank you graciously, right, with your patience around rescheduling our event. We're so excited to be here. Before we begin today's program, we would like to take a moment to honor and name the land that we stand on today. MSU Denver honors and acknowledges that we are on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne and Arapaho nations. This area was also the site of trade, hunting, gathering, and healing for many other native nations, the Lakota, Uti, Kiowa, Comanche, Apache, Shoshone, and others. We recognize the indigenous peoples as the original stewards of the land, water, plants, and animals who call this place home. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties that these nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed. Let us also acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory. We respect the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land on which we gather. We pay our respect to them and give thanks to all tribal nations and the ancestors of this place. We also want to recognize the community and families of Auraria displaced by the creation of this campus for MSU Denver to have a place that we now call home. Additionally, we would like to take this opportunity to thank this year's co-sponsors and supporters for this event, the Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies Department, the Center for Multicultural Education and Inclusion, the CLAS Dean's Office, and the MSU Denver Women of Color Collective. We are in deep gratitude for your support. Lastly, on your programs is a QR code that will take you to a quick few-question survey where you can provide feedback after the event and include recommendations for who you would like to see next year for our bridge speaker. Awesome. So moving on, I would now like to bring up Elizabeth Reyes, graduating senior in the Department of Chicano Studies at MSU Denver, who will introduce the speakers. Thank you.
Welcome everyone. We are gathered here today to celebrate the long-standing annual Bridge Speaker, which serves as a bridge between Black History Month in February and Women's History Month in June. We are honored and excited to introduce Lorja Garcia Peña as NIDA's 32nd annual Bridge Speaker. Dr. Lorja Garcia Peña is a Latinx studies scholar, award-winning author, activist, and scholar. She is a professor in the Afron Center for the Study of America in the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. She serves as the co-editor of the University of Texas Press series, Latinx, the Future is Now. A leading reference in the world of ethnic studies, her work is concerned with the ways in which anti-Blackness and xenophobia intersect the global north, producing categories of exclusion that led to violence and erasure. Her research insists on highlighting the knowledge, cultural, social, and political contributions of people who have been silenced from traditional archives, paying attention to the intersections of Blackness, colonialism, migration, and censoring Black Latinx lives. Dr. Garcia Peña is a winner of the Angela Davis Prize for Public Scholarship and the author of 3 award-winning books, The Borders of the Mizada, Race, Nations, and Archives of Contradictions, Translating Blackness, Latinx, Coloniality, I'm so sorry. In global perspective and community as a zealot. Please join me in welcoming Gloria Garcia Peña to the stage.
Thank you so much. You don't hear me? I don't project very well. Yes.
as many of you know, I'm going through some difficult personal time in my life as I accompanied my father through his transition to the other side, which is why we have to move the date. I've canceled everything else except this event because I wanted to be here. This is the kind of community that I want to be in at this time. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here. When I spoke to the organizers about my presentation, I said that I would share some of my work around transnational Black Latina feminism. And I was excited particularly since the silencing and erasure of Black Latinas continue to shape our lives and death here, there, and everywhere. But if I'm honest, when I sat down to prepare for this talk, for today's talk, I struggled with what to say, given the state of our world, with genocide in Palestine and July, with the continued violence in Haiti and Congo, just to mention 4 of the ongoing human tragedies caused by the trifecta of colonialism, capitalism, and racism. The suffering and the loss is so deep and so vast that it's hard to keep going. And yet we must, and we will, and we are, because it is one way in which we stand against the death they impose. Slide, please. So today I'll be sharing a reflection on Black Dominicanas' anti-colonial struggle against death as an exercise in vulnerability. The Dominican Republic, where I was born, continues to be the country with one of the highest rates of femicides in the world. But looking at Dominicanas' migration in the 21st century, which is mostly women-identifying migrants, that connection between anti-human violence and migration is rarely made. Likewise, despite the fact that 89% of the Dominican population is Afro-descendant, we do not see Dominican women fight against death as a struggle for Black lives. This is in part because of how we in the United States have conceptualized Blackness, and in part due to the fact that as colonized, minoritized, poor, immigrant, and Black, Dominicanas are always relegated to footnotes. So today, if you allow me, I'm hoping to bring them to the center of the discussion. And through that, help us think a bit about what anti-colonialism, Black radicalism, and transnational feminism can look like if we allow ourselves to see it. So, allow me to start the story. Slide, please. The first time I heard the name Sagrario Diaz, I was 9 years old. It was the late 80s, and the group was Joaquin Balaguer once again moving the Dominican Republic. There was student protest at the Universidad Autónoma de Santo Domingo, or the UAS, and I was caught between the middle of it as I made my way from La UAS Elementary School on the southeast end of campus to La Facultad de Humanidades on the central campus where my mother worked as an office assistant because Butcher lived there. Every day I walked about a mile from my school to Humanidades, crossing through the campus center to get to my mother's office so we could teach us home together. Slide, please. I often encountered protests along my walk from school. Sometimes they were student confrontations. Other times there were peaceful marches. That day the protest was intense. Car tires had been set ablaze, and the police were spreading tear gas to dissipate the crowd of protesters. A young man told me to squat behind him and to protect me from the tear gas. Somehow, I was not scared. As he raised his fist and yelled, I found myself joining in the chant. ¿Quién mató a Sagrario Díaz? La maldita policía. Who killed Sagrario Díaz? Dead police. I did not know yet who Sagrario Díaz was, but I knew in my bones that La maldita policía had killed her, and that I knew was not right. Slide, please. At the age of 9, as I screamed along with college students on the historic site where activist Sagrario Díaz had been killed in 1972, almost a decade before I was born, my burning from tear gas and smoke from scorching tires. I did not yet understand the single most important reality that would shape my life and that of so many women at home and in the diaspora. We're terrible danger. Every day. Everywhere. It's like this. Our partners, fathers, the government, the police, or even random people can kill us. And once we're gone, that's it. We can be forgotten, erased, like we never existed, unless we remember, unless we insist on chanting each other's names, even when we are strangers to each other. It's like this. Salgado Diaz was a student in the economics department at La UAS, the oldest university in the Americas. On April 4th, 1972, she went to campus with her brother Phidias to register for classes for the coming term. The official police report states that they received a tip that a communist leader who had been in exile for months had arrived in the country and was hiding amongst the students. Police believed that he was hiding in Aguas. Balaguer, who was the right-hand man of the dictator Rafael Leonidas Trujillo during his 31-year regime, took office in 1966, back to the United States after a tumultuous transition to democracy in both the country. Just for context, between 1961, when Trujillo was assassinated, and 1962, when Balaguer took office, the country experienced a coup, a civil war, and a U.S. military intervention. Balaguer became the U.S. Cuban ally in the fight against communism at a moment in which fear of quote-unquote another Cuba dominated international politics. Again, this is the 60s, right after the Cuban Revolution. Back in the United States and with support from the CIA, President Balaguer terrorized the country during what's known as the terrible 12 years between 1966 and 1972, operating with impunity as he imprisoned, tortured, disappeared, and murdered people who perceived to be dissidents, communists, or just troublemakers. And just a parenthesis, I'm reading this, I can't stop thinking about Columbia students right now taking over campus and how we are living a new version of this kind of repression in our college campuses. La UAS University, which had become a site of youth political movement, particularly those associated with the left, became a special target of the regime. The students and professors were often terrorized and persecuted on and off campus. It was within this climate of fear that the National Police occupied La UAS on April 4th, 1972, injuring many students and killing Salgado Diaz. The assassination of Diaz in 1972, more than any other crime of the terrible 12 years of the regime, continues to be remembered across multiple generations of students who see her as a symbol of student fight for democracy across the Americas. Of particular significance is the perdurance of the call and response chant that first introduced me to Salgado Diaz in 1988. Slide please. ¿Quién mató a Salgado Diaz? La maldita policía. The slogan, which is still used at times during student demonstrations at La UAS, is a historical contradiction of the state-sanctioned violence that operated with impunity for decades. The diction, ¿Quién mató?, as uttered by the students in 1988, was not a question, but a declaration, followed by the defiant contradiction, La maldita policía. Protesters in Brazil revived the chant after the 2017 murder of Black activist Marielle Franco by 2 former police officers. Slide please. As with Salgado Diaz, those who chanted "Que mató Marielle Franco" are not asking a question, they already know the answer. Rather, they're demanding justice while also reminding listeners of the insidious ways the repetition of violence operates in its normalization. ¿Quién mató a Salgado Diaz? La maldita policía replaces the state-sanctioned narrative of exculpation that articulates violence as the result of individual action, the proverbial bad apple, with the more accurate interpretation of the state as the perpetrator of systemic violence. In so doing, the diction quien mató becomes a warning, a prediction on más custodian. Revisited in the current context, as police violence against Black people has led to a global call for accountability, quien mató a Sagrario Díaz, la maldita policía, also summons the repetition of state violence, state sanctioned violence, particularly against Black women and girls, that has shaped the better part of our modern history. Now, this talk opened with the names of 7 Black women from Hispaniola: Yolanda Guzmán, Sagrario Díaz, Mama Tingo, Lucrecia Perez Matos, Joan Forvil, Jessica Mori, Caterina Rodriguez Taveras, whose lives were violently ripped from this earth by state sanction, death, and hate. Some, like Sagrario Díaz, were activists, warrior women who spent their lives trying to make their communities and their country better. Others, like Joan Forvil, who died at the hands of the Chilean police, were migrants, brave women, who left the island of their birth in hopes of providing better lives for their families, children, and themselves. I have listed only 7 names, but the list can go on and on. As you read these names, please consider the overwhelming boundlessness of Black women's death and the impossibility of containing the limits of these losses and the extent of their lasting violence. Please also consider the coexistence of Black women's death and remembrance, the killing of Sagrario Díaz in 1972, and the chant that we remembered her through my 9-year-old volume in 1988. This coexistence of death and remembrance is central to Afro-Latino feminist praxis. The rate of femicide in the Dominican Republic is the highest in Latin America and the Caribbean. Likewise, rape, abduction, child marriages, and the penalization of abortion continue to violate the lives of Dominicans. State-sanctioned violence against women and girls is entangled with global capitalism, often through sex tourism and labor exploitation, and is a clear manifestation of anti-Blackness. For working Dominicanas, the path to political representation, equal rights, and liberation in their home country has been barred by centuries of institutionalized misogyny, colonialism, and the interconnections between state-sponsored racial capitalism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, or what Christina Sharp calls the ground we walk on. For Dominicanas of Haitian descent, as Amarillos Estrellas' work shows, death accompanies the work of the living. It is not just the ground we walk on, but their very sustenance, the only assurance of a future rest. Women activists fighting against these intersecting evils, as in the case of Yolanda Guzmán, Sagrario Díaz, and Mama Tingo, are often silenced with death. Cynically, in their death, the Dominican state sanctions them as patriotic symbols through vacuous ceremonies, floral offerings, and media remembrances of their death, while the living continue to walk the ground before death. State-sponsored symbolism does not translate into political empowerment or enfranchisement of Black Dominicanas. So for many Dominicanas, migration becomes a promise of survival. At times, in the case of Lucrecia, Joan, and Caterina, death follows them across the sea. For others, as in the case of women, the activist women stories that we'll share with you today, the diaspora translates death into the political language of Black feminist political power and resistance, forming kinship networks and communities of joy. Audre Lorde asserts that feminism is always plural, always essential, always dangerous, and most of all, always a process of alliance against patriarchal hegemony. More recently, Jessica Mary Johnson wants us to think about the ongoing state death and violence against Black women as always contrasted with and confronted by future communities of freedom. Following the Black feminist tradition of struggle, community, and joy, I want to memorialize the ways Black Dominicanas rebel against death, how their communities of freedom fuels their fight against state sponsor physical, political, and civil death. Slide, please. Now, after the execution of dictator Trujillo in 1961, a revolutionary energy manifested in every demographic of the Dominican population. Farmers began to organize and reclaim land ownership. Migration to the city and to the United States increased as a form of economic mobility for the poor and the youth. Both the working class and the middle class youth began to organize politically through community-based organizations and formal political parties. The youth struggled to place into arenas through the political parties and through the university. In 1962, thanks in great part to the work of young activists and students, the revolutionary energy of the moment led to the election of social democratic leader Juan Bosch as president of the Dominican Republic. And that is the last time we had a democratic elected president. But after only 7 months in office, a U.S. supported coup that overthrew the government of Bosch, and a 3-man military junta was replacing the first democratically elected government of the 20th century. Now, if you can imagine, if you are young and you've been fighting for democracy, you've been fighting for an election, you finally get your candidate to win, and then there's a coup. There was a lot of anger among the youth and frustration in the general population, and that activated an unprecedented participation in political activism, which culminated in the Civil War in 1965. The war is known as La Guerra de Abril, and I wanted to talk about it today because in April, so to remember it. And it took place between April 24th and September 3rd, 1965. Now, the goal of the war was to restore the democratically elected President Juan Bosch. During the first days of the conflict, guerrillas distributed weapons and Molotov cocktails to civilian comrades who poured into the city from all over the country to join the effort. After only 4 days of battle and what looked like a landslide victory for Bosch on April 29th, surprise, surprise, U.S. President Lyndon Johnson authorized a large-scale military intervention aimed at preventing the development of what he saw as a potential seventh human revolution. Slide, please. Now, La Guerra de Abril is one of the most studied events in the 20th century Dominican history. Aside from a handful of Muslim middle-class women, all published photographs, books, and demonstrations and consecrations of the heroes of the 1965 war were about and for men. Yet feminist scholarship, feminist testimonies, collective memory, and the testimonies of revolutionary women gathered by journalist Margarita Cordero in the mid-70s all demonstrate that the 1965 war would not have been possible had it not been for the women who risked their lives transporting weapons, serving as messengers, tricking U.S. Marines, and engaging in combat. The participation of middle-class women like Cordero in the revolution was also critical. Women communicated with the different commandos, the messengers, and took over the custodial task of care for the wounded soldiers. However, middle-class women, Cordero assured me, contrary to what historians have argued, did not participate in active combat. Rather, the women who fought and died on the front lines were working class and poor women from the neighborhoods on the outskirts of Santo Domingo, better known as La Parte Alta. In early May, many of these women, most of them black, were killed during the U.S. Marine-supported Operación Limpieza Operation Puma. Yolanda. Now, Yolanda Garden is 83 years old now. She's an Afro-Dominicana who is an immigrant in Italy. She lives in Lakewood, Italy. She lived in La Parte Alta's iconic Ensanche de Perón in 1965, one of the main battle sites of the U.S. military intervention. Garden participated in the iconic Batalla del Puente Duarte on April 27th, in which the revolutionary forces overthrew the military and essentially won the war prior to the U.S. intervention. And she continued to serve served the revolution thereafter, working as a messenger and a spy in the weeks that followed the intervention. Please follow the testimony. Despite her contributions, the majority of working class Afro-Dominicanas like Yolanda have been relegated to obscurity by a male-dominated archive that is more comfortable with the mythification of a handful of light-skinned, middle-class women than with acknowledging the tangible and essential roles of many Black working Dominicanas. Romero argues that the women who participated in battle were purposely obscured and replaced by the more powerful image of the white girls, or what she calls the selfies. One of the selfies is the iconic image of Tina Basuto. The famous photo depicts a smiling, light-skinned teenage girl holding a rifle in her right hand and a pair of sunglasses in her left. Slide, please. Tina is, that's the photo in the battle attire, as you can see. The caption for the photo, as well as the narrative around its subject, describes her, and I quote, as an exceptional 16-year-old girl who one day joined the revolution. The photo, which has also become the logo for the highly profitable Tina Basuto beer, made by artisanal República Brewery, you see the picture on the right, shows the teenage girl wearing a skirt and sandals, seeming not at all preoccupied with the war she was supposed to be fighting. The image, which has become emblematic of La Vieja de Abril, is a misrepresentation. The girl in the photo is actually Julia Cabral Carrizano, a light-skinned, upper-middle-class Dominicana whose brother fought in the revolution. Cabral Carrizano was with her brother's rifle, but was not actually involved at all in the revolution. But Tina Basuto did exist. The real Tina, right here on the left, was 28-year-old Agustina Rivas, a Rayana, or border town woman from the town of Managua in the northwest of San Francisco. Rivas was born in May 13, 1927, a few days after Trujillo ordered what is known as the Parsley Massacre that killed over 20,000 people in the town, most of them ethnic Asians. In 1954, she moved with her family to the city in search for work. Now, those who knew her described Tina as a tomboy with a hot temper and a real reputation for justice. She was a fighter for the workers' rights and an active member of the local workers' union. She worked all kinds of odd jobs, not traditionally considered in the 1960s as quote-unquote feminine, including security guard and dock worker. During her free time, she volunteered as a boxing coach for children and teenagers and was an active member of her neighborhood's association. When the revolution began, Rivas joined with the rebels, immediately standing out amongst the women due to her superb combat abilities. Efrain Sanchez, who served in the same military commando as Rivas, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him, remembers her, and I quote, as the only woman capable of taking on the frontmen, the mosquito de guerrilla fighters, era tan buena que la tenían entrenando a los hombres. Nos daba vergüenza, pero eso había que hacernos más bravos. She was so good that she put us all to shame and made us braver. It was because of her uncanny abilities as a sniper that Rivas earned the nickname Tina Basuto. Stories about Tina Basuto spread like wildfire among the women of the revolution. Yolanda Garden, who I introduced you to before, who never met her, remembers, and I quote, todo el mundo sabía quién era ella, aunque no la conocieran. Era una leyenda. We all knew her, even though we did not know her. She was a legend. After the revolution, Rivas continued to work for workers' rights. However, facing persecution during the terrible 12 years, she migrated by raft to Puerto Rico in 1976, 4 years after the assassination of Saddam Hussein. Unlike Yolanda Garden and other Dominican women veterans who found refuge in the social democratic environment of the 1980s Italy, Rivas was quickly deported from Puerto Rico back to the Dominican Republic, and after multiple attempts later on to migrate and establish herself in the U.S. diaspora, Rivas was forced to return to Santo Domingo in 1991, where she struggled to find work and support herself and her daughter. 5 years later, she died of a massive heart attack at the age of 59. Of the multiple testimonies and stories of La Guerrera de Vida have been entrusted to me over the years, Tina Bazucas is the most remarkable. She lived an extraordinary life against death from birth, yet her extraordinary life has been obscured by a fictionalized image that mimics and reproduces the Dominican colonial desire for whiteness. That the Cabral Cabezano girl, the photo, has been celebrated and commercialized, while the real Tina Bazuca experienced persecution, migration, deportation, hunger, and violence, tells us all we need to know about Dominican state valuation, or lack of thereof, of Black women's lives. It exemplifies the gender-based violence through which Black Dominicanas' deeds and bodies are appropriated and performed through whitewashed representations that are more acceptable to the public. It illuminates Dominican colonial desire for whiteness at the expense of Black lives. And for those who are not familiar with Dominican history, since its foundation, the Dominican Republic has had this myths about the white Dominican Union, and that has fueled sort of patriotism and a nationalist agenda at the expense of Black Dominican women. In the 19th century, the image of the quote-unquote white Dominican virgin in the protection fueled anti-Haitian violence and plagued the national narrative. And after the fall of Trujillo in 1961, Patria, Minerva, and Maria Teresa Mirabal, who were brutally murdered in 1960 as a result of political work against the regime, became symbols of the new patria in which women could become potential political actors. The death of the Mirabal sisters, 3 light-skinned upper-class women, is often invoked as the single most traumatic event of the Trujillo regime, even when compared to the genocide of over 20,000 ethnic Haitians and Afro-Dominicans in Dajabon, the town where Tina Bazuca was from, the execution of dozens of political dissidents, and the rape and torture of hundreds of women and girls. And I don't want to diminish the significance of the Mirabal sisters, either in the political work against the Trujillo regime or as symbols of the struggle to end violence against women. And just so you know, the November 25th date that we commemorate as a date against violence against women is the date in which they were killed. So it's a day that is commemorated in our sisters. But what I want to do here is call attention to the quote-unquote older women who are erased from the history of the very nation they want to build. Women like Lorena Garden, who have taken their fight against death to the diaspora precisely because, and I quote Garden, if I did not leave, I would be dead. We must not silence these women, poor, Black, brown, migrant, trans, queer women, in their archives and in their lives. Slide, please. I want to go back to Yolanda because she's my favorite. She's my hero. She has lived a life worthy of a novel and many who writers happen to share. She traveled the 7 seas on the Onassis boat. She fought a civil war. She worked as a spy. And she contributed to the founding of the first queer bar in the Dominican Republic under a dictatorship. She migrated to Italy in the 80s in search of peace and a better future away from the island and the aftermath of the repression and suppression of the regime. But as you can imagine, a revolutionary spirit cannot be content with rest while there is injustice. And like many other activists and revolutionary women who migrated to Italy in the post-Bataille years, Garden has continued to organize for migrant rights in the diaspora, particularly for the protection of young women and girls of color who have been sold into prostitution by human traffickers. And just a side note of a story, when I first met Yolanda in now 2013, and she's in her 80s. She showed me how she actually liberates women. So she physically goes into these homes with an old, the leg of an old table, and she basically liberates this woman from captivity. Again, extremes. It's a badass. She says she hopes to continue doing this work as long as she can walk. So, wow. Well, perhaps known as dramatic as Gardens Rescues, the work of other Boris Balaguer women migrants in Italy has impacted the everyday life of people or of other women of color and queer migrants, as is the case of the 2006 election with Mercedes Frias, slide please, a Black Dominican migrant and community organizer, as the first Black woman to ever represent in the Italian parliament. Mercedes Frias remembers her arrival to Tuscany as an opportunity to continue her lifelong commitment to the struggle for women's and workers' rights. It was also a turning point that transformed her activism into a tangible transnational political agenda. Like Sagario Diaz, Frias had been introduced to social justice and activism work as a student at the UAS, where she joined multiple student organizations. Through these organizations, she worked on environmental protection projects and volunteered in education communities. Frias remembers UAS as the home of her militancy, the Casa Militancia, the place where she came of age as an activist, politicized around the intersecting identities that shaped her life and her work, being Black, woman, working class, and queer. Shortly after completing her degree in geography, Frias migrated in the late 80s to Italy to pursue postgraduate education. And just a parenthesis, this is a moment in which Italy did not yet require visas for most Latin American countries, so it was easier place to migrate. Soon after arriving, she became involved with the local migrant women organizations, serving first as a translator and later becoming an advocate and a leader for migrant women's rights. Her arrival in Tuscany also coincided with a critical moment in Italy as Italy began to grapple with its role as an immigrant receiving nation and the effects of that role on the road of anti-Black and anti-immigrant violence. She recalls these years as moments of great struggles, yet magical. Given her experience working with Haitian migrants in the Dominican Republic and women's and workers' rights, Frias very quickly became a leader in the region, spearheading the creation of multiple migrant women's organizations, including the Nosotras Association, the European Social Forum on Migrant Women, and the local chapter of NARA. One of the most significant accomplishments, though, of Frias' leadership has been the amendment of Constitutional Article 18. So, Constitutional Article 18 basically granted women who had been sold into prostitution or otherwise by human traffickers asylum. But the issue with it is that they would stamp the passport with a big Article 18 stamp. And so you literally were marked in the moment that you were granted asylum and then you were marked as a prostitute in a Catholic country like England. So Mercedes Frias took on the charge of changing this, and she did. She was able to. And because of this and other victories, Frias was eventually nominated as the Tuscan candidate for the revamped Italian Communist Party. She won, becoming the first Black woman to serve in the Italian Parliament. During our conversations over the last decade, Frias has shared stories of her time as a community organizer in Italy and in the Dominican Republic. Her remarkable life has been shaped by her ability to belong to and co-create communities of women of color who more than anything else desire to live in justice and dignity. Mercedes' political life began in her home in the Dominican Republic, where as a working class Black woman she dreamt, like Sagario Diaz and many others, a change of a possible future free of violence. Yet Mercedes found in Santo Domingo only and the possibility of fulfilling her dream, her potential, if you will, as full human. So she opted to migrate, and like many, myself included, she later attempted to return, hoping that her years in the diaspora and, I don't know, newfound wisdom or whatever they can do, will create opportunities to continue her work at home. In the Dominican Republic, though, she was met with disdain and scorn, as Black Dominicanas from the diaspora often are. She was dubbed a troublemaker, and as such, there was no place for her in the institutional structures of a state that continues to sanction Black women's death and exclusion. So after 3 years of trying to establish herself in the Dominican Republic, unable to find work, disdained by the very university she had hoped on top of her militancy, Mercedes was forced to return to Italy as a migrant. In the 19th century, the Dominican Republic was imagined as a site of Black freedom, where Black people around the world would fulfill their rights as citizens. The DR was a place where U.S. Black doctor, second woman to be doctor in the U.S., Sarah Logan Fraser, first opened her practice and became the first woman to practice medicine. Yet a century later, women like Frias, Anne Garden, and hundreds of other working women activists saw no other way but to leave in order to do elsewhere that which Sarah Logan had to do in their land, becoming free women. Or as Marlene de la Cruz, women migrants, most of whom have a history of activism in the post-Bolivian Dominican Republic. Founded in 2009 to, and I quote, improve the dignity and equality of immigrant women and to protect against gender-based violence and discrimination, Anacaona is moved by a collective desire to end the cycle of death and violence that led many women to migrate and that seeks to follow Dominicanos across the Atlantic. Anacaona provides legal and psychological counsel to migrants who are facing challenges including domestic violence, family separation, work discrimination, abuse, and persecution by sex and human traffickers. They work closely with the municipality and councilors to support women who are in danger. They also create spaces for community building, celebration, language learning, child rearing support. Over their decades of existence, Anacaona has succeeded in organizing the Dominicanas community in the Milan metropolitan area through solidarity and a feminist network of support, despite the growth of the extreme right politics in Italy and amidst the growing global conflict of anti-Blackness. While their efforts often go unnoticed, due in part to the limited access to social media networks, and in part to the discreet nature of their work, Anacaona's actions summon the spirit of the indigenous leader after which they're named, the Taino cacique warrior poet who rebelled against the Spanish colonization and died fighting for her right to live and for her and her people's rights to freedom. When I began to do research in Italy in 2013, Anacaona Mujeres Dominicanas welcomed me with open arms. Their trust and support that I received from the women there facilitated my research and provided a home for me in Italy for me and my son. Over the years, I got a front row seat to witness their actions, their care, their attention, their fight against death, and their unquavering commitment to Black women. In their fight, I saw the fight of all Dominicanos. Their proposal for community rebellion was not a radical one. It did not include marching in the streets, though they sometimes marched. It did not necessarily include throwing rocks and burning tires, but they were more than ready to do so. They had to. It did not include collecting data and writing books, though their qualitative research and story archive is, to me, the most complete archive of Dominicanidad I have ever encountered. The rebellion was grounded in care. on a radical hope for change, on the conviction that they deserve everything, dignity, whatever they may decide. Their revolution is a manifestation of the simplest and most necessary of feminisms, one that centers Black women and asserts that Black women deserve life. Revisiting the work and writing of the Black feminists who sustain me, Audre Lorde, Ochi Curiel, Ulysses Espinosa, Jose Morales, and the ladies. One reminder transcends language and history. We, Black women, must rebel in transnational community. Our work, our lives, our struggle against death are not bound by the borders of the nation state, and therefore cannot only be fought within and within national paradigms. Or as Ochi Curiel puts it, tenemos que ser antinacionalistas para tener luchas comunes. We must be anti-nationalists to fight for common struggles. My intention in foregrounding the work of migrant women in the Italian diaspora does not in any way intend to romanticize migration as a solution to violence. Death and violence are part of the everyday life of migrants. From the state-sanctioned drowning of boats in the Mediterranean, to the separation of families and caging of children who live in the border, to the denationalization of ethnic Haitians in the Dominican Republic, violence against migrants is too present, too significant to ignore. What the diaspora, and particularly the Italian diaspora, has afforded Black Dominicanas has been the possibility of encountering themselves as part of a larger, stronger and more visible political network. They are equipped with a language that allows them to create common struggles, as Julia suggests. In the diaspora, they understand that their exclusion from the nation is exclusion from the world, based on colonial structures that are still shaping citizenship and belonging. In the diaspora, Dominicanas thus translate their struggles through a language of Black and migrant solidarity, and in so doing, they're able to build a larger network of inclusion that speaks back to the Dominican nation on the global stage. As Black women and migrants, they confront together the structures that lead them to migrate in the first place. The diaspora is not always less violent than home. It is simply a larger arena from which to fight against the common enemy. It is a place from which to return, or from which to possess a new form of knowledge in transnational community. For some, the diaspora is just another side of violence and death. For others, it allows them to see the interstices and become empowered and even comfortable in their own belonging. Slide, please. Or as De La Cruz told me, rejection here, rejection there. They think they're so big and not wanting us. They just don't get it. We don't need them without us. Who needs them? We are our own country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your
Try this one. This one's better. Slow.
Hello? Okay. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation and your powerful speech. It really touched my heart, and I'm pretty sure it touched everyone in the room. We appreciate you for being here and coming to be in community with us while you grieve, and we just want to extend our condolences to you, and we appreciate you for being here. I wanted to start the Q&A sessions by asking you some questions that I have in regards to one of your books, Vicky as a Valiant. And then from there, we can open it up to the audience and get some questions and some dialogue going. So within your presentation, I think this question really touches to what I read in your book. And it was reading the part of the letter of recommendation that says, to overcome the violence, poverty, and shame of her background. What was your initial response? And does your background bring you shame? Is there any truth in that statement? Did this mentor even know you and your story enough to make this decision?
You were right in there. So, for those of you who have not read the book, Community as Rebellion is a very personal book that I wrote in the middle of the pandemic. Not really intending to write a book, honestly. I was just ranting. And just became something else, and it has a life of its own now. But in one of the chapters, I talk about my experience as a graduate student, and the whole book is about surviving academia in this body and coming from the backgrounds that I come from. And this particular question refers to a sort of accident, really, that happened when I was applying for a Ford Foundation Dissertation Fellowship way back when. And for some glitch in the system, in a portfolio, the letters were sent to me rather than directly to the foundation. And so I get these letters, and I mean, once you get the letters, you're going to read it. I'm there. A wonderful things my professor is saying about me. And this one white professor, Jessica Garsko, who's a historian of ironically the Dominican Republic, and having a member of the dissertation community, wrote something that I think he thought was supposed to be supportive, but that I nearly destroyed me. It was something along the lines of, you know, this young woman comes from like a poor background from the ghetto, and look at how far she's come. And so the picture that he gave was like, you know, she's a survivor of poverty and terrible backgrounds, and she made it all the way to grad school. And so I write about that experience of reading that and realizing it was, my first reaction was not stuff I could say in public. There's a lot of explanative in Spanish and English. Then when I got a chance to talk to my friends, to other folks, and you know, I didn't feel at the time that I could talk to my managers about it. Grad school was a very strange place for me. I never really felt like I knew what I was doing. But when I talked to folks over the years about it, it became really liberating because it allowed me to really see that I wasn't crazy. Like when I was coming out of those meetings and I felt like unseen, and I felt like the interactions were racist, but there was nothing really explicitly said about my race, but I left and I, you know that feeling, right? Like you leave, you're like, is that racist? And the answer is yes, by the way. So I let, you know, it was liberating me. Liberating me in the sense that I knew now that everything that I had been feeling all these years in grad school was not my imagination. There was nothing wrong with me. Everything was wrong with them and that system. And so that was really validating. I know there's no truth to any of it. I'm incredibly proud of where I come from, and I don't think that the university gave me knowledge that I didn't have from my communities. It just gave me tools of how to translate that knowledge in a way that I never pictured. Right? So it was not, it didn't reflect who I am, and it still doesn't.
Thank you for that. And another question that I had is, as students, how can we advocate for professors? How do we go about asking for more representation in positions of actual power?
That's a great question, and I think you'll have the answer because I know that you guys just did that thing. Students have a lot of power. If we think about the neoliberal university, within that structure, neoliberalism, everything customers. And sometimes students forget how much power you have. You don't have a university without students. You can't. Your students pay attention. But the administration does a really good job of two things. One, making you feel afraid. And two, play the late game. And, hosting those meetings like 5 days before winter break or late April, and they count on the clock. They know that there is a real clock that happens in terms of how students get radicalized, right? That by the time that students are ready to do this fight, they got about a year and a half left in their college time, and they're counting on that and winning it out. So I think it's really important to organize across, organize with first and second year students, organize with staff, faculty together. Those are the most building coalition across, and demanding not only non-representation in a way that only makes more violence to the person being hired. We do nothing if we hire one. That person is not going to be able to do much except be in a lot of pain. So I'm a big fan of, despite the fact that sometimes it turns into cluster thoughts, the cluster hires. But you bring massive number of people in a variety of ranks when it comes to faculty, specifically having people who are tenured and who are able to do the kind of work on, and then also bringing young folks who are just finishing, who have great ideas, who have senior faculty support them. So asking for numbers, not just one hire, but like massive numbers of hires, and finding also allies that are really minded, not just about representation in terms of having
Thank you for that. We're gonna open it up to the audience, so if you guys have any questions.
You're welcome to come up to the podium or shout them loudly.
We can walk a mic over to it's cordless.
Don't be shy, she canceled all her plans for us.
So you mentioned your mom and walking across campus to go around the school and whatever. How is she like? I'm trying to remember, but I can't word it. Do you have the support there with the family? Like, is there like real big generational difference with how she sees things and how you see things? Is that?
I'm a really supportive family. I have a really strong network of my parents were really my blog, really just siblings, nieces, I have a son, I have a partner. They're all extremely supportive. Most of them don't know what the hell I do. Still, 22 years in academia, and I'm still like, oh, you don't teach on Wednesday, you're great. Or like, I don't tell them when I'm on sabbatical, because that would be really bad. So it's still, I don't expect them to understand. This job we do is very strange. And so my brother always asks me when he sees me working, not that I'm spending so much time at my dad's house with my computer trying to get through stuff, is always asking me, is this one of the free shit we do? So understanding like all the elements of the job is not something that I expect. And I hear a lot from grad students feeling sort of overwhelmed and a big sense of sorrow that their families cannot understand what they do. Let it go. Take the support that they can give you, the love that they can give you, and use that for strength. It's not necessary to understand all of the really aspects of the profession. You just need some people to have your back and that understand that what having your back means. So when I was fired from Harvard, my dad, I was struggling with not just a profession, but like this is 2020, this is a pandemic, and I had a son, and I was a single parent, and I was struggling with like, how am I going to support myself? Like, I'm not a job. And my dad called me up and said, you always gotta let some pizza when you come. And that's what I need to do. So just take a look where you can get it.
Thank you for being here today. My name is Dr. Antoinette Gomez, and I was invited by my dear friend Mary, who we were colleagues at an organization called Project A. I have my master's degree in Africana Women's Studies, so this is an area that's very passionate. My thesis was on Black women who were involved in the environmental justice movement and their stories of activism. So I want to ask, in the spirit of Arturo Schomburg, who said that people of African descent, when he was a child in Puerto Rico, and he was told that they didn't have any history, that they had no significance and contribution in Puerto Rican culture or on the island, and the fight now with DEI, against diversity, equity, and inclusion, of which I say diversity. Let's talk about E&I first, and then let's get back to D. It's not affirmative action. It's not numbers of people, but it's also just putting a couple token people in places of power, as you mentioned. I wanted to ask, how are you sensing in the literature and in the research that people of African Cuban, African Latino, African Dominicana cultures are being liberated by the stories that have been submersed and oppressed over generations of these women and men and people of all different intersectionalities, as you mentioned. What kind of sense do you feel? Is there a space for those type of dissertations and theses? And how are people in the communities responding to the unearthing of the voices?
I'm actually teaching a seminar on Latinidad at the moment, and I'm really enjoying it with a group of students who are all men or Black. So it's been really beautiful to teach this class. Anti-Blackness in the Latin American and Latinx communities is a thing. It's very, very real, and it's very, very old. It's very grounded on ideologies of mestizaje that we have so ingrained, right? And in the co-option of ideas of nation and identity and nationalism as opposed to race. So we're not Black or white, we're Dominicanos. We're not Black or white, we're Mexicanos. And in that narrative, there's a lot of erasure of Blackness and indigeneity that happens in all of our countries, and of course a transfer to the US and other diasporas. But I am excited to see from just the academic perspective what is happening within Latino studies and within Black studies in terms of a renewed interest and awareness of our histories, of the contributions and the presence of Afro-Latinidades in the United States. I think there's definitely a shift. This is a really important moment of growth, I think, in terms of the books that are being published and in terms of the research that we're seeing. There's a long way to go. And we'll continue to only see some aspects, and some other aspects are not really engaged. So there's still a lot of work to do. U.S. academia is very U.S.-centered. Even when we're supposed to be doing transnational global work. So I just hosted a symposium last week on campus, which I call Documented Blackness, looking at the intersections of migration and anti-Blackness in the world. And people were uncomfortable by not understanding, because it was multilingual. Well, if we're doing a conversation that it's about the global, experience of Blackness, why would the expectation be that everyone speaks English? Right? So we have a lot of hurdles still to overcome in how we engage in academia, and how do we take seriously the way that people imagine and name themselves. So we've been saying for half a century that race is a social construct, but we're not open to seeing how race is constructed in different societies, which is exactly what that means and how that changed over time. And so if we have someone like Henry Louis Gates Jr. going to the Dominican Republic in Brazil, looking around and saying, these people don't know that they're Black. No, motherfucker, you don't know who they are. So there's no awareness of how these people are constructing their own Blackness because they're not using the right terminology, perhaps. But that doesn't change the fact that they are indeed Black, and that they are leaving the cost of anti-Blackness and the legacies of colonialism under very everyday lives. And so I think we need to listen more, take seriously how people are naming themselves and how they're naming their experiences rather than sort of coming into these spaces and applying our knowledge and our theories. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of listening across, I think. But I still think it's a hopeful moment. I've seen a lot of growth, and the young people are teaching us. So we need to be and listen. Thank you very much.
We have time for one more.
That's it.
One more question.
I'm an happy roll. All right, make it count. One question.
Elizabeth has a couple too, if no one else is.
No last takers for that question? Okay, so one of my questions is how do we react in response to folks who look like us but only sympathize with us and offer no support or solution?
I mean, no skin color people. It's not about what the person looks like or even how they identify ethnically. It's about are they showing up and how are they showing up for you and for your communities. We have a history, we talked about DEI just now, of universities have a history of hiring people of color that are going to be buying into the status quo. And so you have to wonder when someone becomes a president of a university or a dean, how they got there, and is there work doing the work that you need for your communities, or are we just being blindsided by the fact that they look like us? So find your people, and your people sometimes are not in the room with you, and that's okay, but find the people who got you. Not necessarily the people that come from the same communities or that identify racially or ethnically. Thank you.
Let's just give one more round of applause for Dr. Laura Chalmers. That concludes our program for the day. Thank you so much for being here. If you can, take 1 second to fill out that feedback form. The QR code is on your program. Otherwise, I'm deeply grateful to be in community with you all today. Thank you for attending, and stay warm somehow. Winter is back today.